It's a challenge to get past these sidewalks, some with the poles in the sidewalk.
So we'll take a look at that.
Yeah.
We'll take a look at that, because one of the things, I'll just say this, as we look at improvements, if we see some aesthetic opportunity, I mean, you know, I can't say when any of that would happen, but we need to take everything into consideration. So I don't know exactly what you're talking about there, but I do think that. And back to the back lot, I mean, you're talking about a lot of costs, a lot of digging.
Oh, I get it. I got that in my backyard. I get that. That's not going down.
Underground compared to overhead is 10 to 12 times the cost.
If you go back 2 or 3 slides, maybe one more there, all that stuff goes, that doesn't describe, maybe the investments there don't describe some of the transmission or the issues that happened in June and December. Is that right? Those investments there will not solve any of the problems that occurred in June or December, because that's a higher level issue where you have the transmission.
Yeah, we're addressing that separately.
And
That
so-
work is being done as we speak, and it's, yeah.
But then the next slide, if you go there, so where do the June and December issues fit into any of those 4 points? Do they fit into any of those 4 points? Because that's probably the thing that people remember the most. And
Well-
unforeseen, but I don't think a vehicle accident or an animal describes. And just curious.
Yeah, okay, so specifically, the outages we're talking about here are distribution outages, that 13,200 volt. It's not the 138,000 volt, but there's work being done in these, there's a vegetation issue that we're resolving. I mentioned, you know, that we gotta work on that vegetation issue. If we avoid, we gotta work on that.
And maybe it's just retitling the slides to make it clear, like this is talking about this when your presentation to begin of it may not be linked to the presentation. You're talking about June and December, you're saying these issues that people probably recall the most because I think there was a lot of news issues on it. And then when you're looking at this, you're trying to wait and say,
That's a
well,
good point.
I don't see that.
That's a good point. Yeah, let's look at that, because I think.
The only reason we didn't put June in this is because June is such a unique situation that if we put June in this, all of your other issues look like they aren't issues, but they don't exist because June was so impactful.
Yeah.
I get that, just like the way I'm following the presentation, and I'm looking there.
You're absolutely right. So when we brought this, I wanted to bring out the June and December issues specifically because we understood that y'all might have questions about that, because y'all were impacted. But what we should have done, and we'll make that change for future, and we'll separate that out, because you're absolutely right.
Second question is, PJM, if I go to their website or I start Googling, can I see all the different sources that their energy generation comes from?
All the sources.
So does it come from coal plants, or does it come from hydroelectric power, does it come from?
Check all the above.
So I should be able to see there and like see all the different connection points and
Percentages.
I'm just curious because
I want to say, I think generation source, I'm not sure where, we could help you with that too.
And because the only reason I ask is like I read all these projects, and so there's lots of these green infrastructure projects, and they're great ideas, but then it's like, how do I get the line to where it needs to go to get the power there? It'd just be interesting that, I don't know that it was as big an issue necessarily in years past or the winters when maybe we didn't have as many green initiatives there. Just interesting, like, is it truly an AEP problem where you're trying to just be the network that delivers it, or is it something else that's going on in terms of having a reliant energy grid?
But so that's interesting. So that's a good point. We are since since 2000, probably we're a distribution utility. So you're here talking to a distribution utility, right? We have transmission and distribution. We own transmission, AP Ohio, the AP transmission. We manage that. We work with transmission for PGM as our manager of that grid. We don't own, we have a little bit of generation, but we don't own much generation. It's kind of legacy stuff. And eventually that will be on. We don't own generation. So it's fed through the grid from a variety of sources. And that fuel mix is depending on the market player that bids it into PJM, and they run auctions. And we work auctions. The commission helps us, and they manage the auctions for whoever doesn't shop, because we have shoppers, right? You know, you can shop from anywhere you want. But the generation suppliers bid in to have their generation be accepted into the PJM system, and it's a market-based system. But they also have what's called uneconomic, that we can pull it in an emergency like the December. So they pulled in load that they wouldn't normally call, and it's uneconomic. It's more costly than the norm, but we need the load, and PGM manages that, and that reserve that we have to have for that. But I mean, we could talk, and if you can't find that, I'd be happy, or we can get in touch and feed you more information on that, so you can look at it.
You still come out and do the home audits?
We used to, but in 2020, Senate Bill, HB 6, I want to be close. House Bill 6 that was passed into law and in 2020 ended our energy efficiency. And we would love to get back in that business, but we will help. There's energy efficiency tips and things like that we have. We'll be happy to try to help. We have some of that online.
Yes,
and
EPOhio.com/savings.
Yeah, but not at this point. We'd love to be able to do that because I think that's good.
Worksheet does it before me.
Yeah, I do.
Any other questions from the commission or the public?
I just wanted to second the argument for putting the lines underground, and it's a question of accessibility on the sidewalks. And I think it may be more expensive at first, but when I hear you about all the outages, clearing the trees, there's a lot of cost there involved. And so if they can do it in Worthington, if they can do it in the short north, I'm sure they can do it here.
I think there's an opportunity to align it with a capital improvement project. That's how the Short North got done, to my knowledge, is when the city is doing a major CIP. That's something that can be asked or explored.
But, yeah, I think it's kind of gonna revolve around what are the costs, and then it's not like we decide it's gonna be underground or overhead. It's whoever wants it, right? And I'll give you an example of that, right? We'd be happy to do it. There's a cost delta that can be built in. We actually have approved, and a number of municipalities are thinking about it, and it's underground, areas, and it's called a municipal undergrounding option. It's a tariff that can be designed to, that delta, if the community wants that, there's a slight increase there, and then the net of cost, we look at reliability and all that too. There's issues with that too underground, but again, the trees being so important here and being such a vital part of the community, we're willing to work with y'all in any way we can.
How far down do you have to go? If you bury, how far down do you have to go if you bury lines?
They could depend, they could be anywhere, we have them from 3 feet to as deep as 25 feet. That's hard to answer, it's different in every area.
Thanks very much for your
John,
time.
can I have one more question? The gentleman here, you were asking about the energy efficiency programs. Also, you can go on our website and go to your dashboard, your personal energy dashboard, and it has tons of tips on how you save more on your energy bill, and also it can show you about your usage, and so you can sort of graph it and keep track of where your usage is to help decrease. I always say kids coming home from school, you're not home, they turn up the heat, thermostat, you don't know about it, and you can't figure out why your bill keeps going up. But you look at your energy dashboard and you see, oh, around 3, 4 o'clock, my usage goes up. That's when my kids get home. So maybe you need to have a talk with your kids. But there's a lot of information, a lot of good tips out there on the energy dashboard. You can also sign up for alerts, bill alerts out there, and then also update your information, your contact information, your telephone number, your email address, so that when we do need to contact you about your service, we can. John alluded to that earlier, so that would be a great thing to do.
Thanks so much. Last item on the agenda, and we have a few minutes, so we'll try to wrap up because we're going to be kicked out of the room here momentarily. Tonight, I don't think we'll really have time for much of a discussion, but about a year ago, almost a year ago, we had a former member who appeared before Mike McLaughlin, who was still serves on the Zoning and Variance Committee, former District 1 Commissioner. And he kind of came to us and he mentioned that the street improvements that were made in Clintonville with the bump outs, the street lighting, the enhancement that were made about 20 years ago that Clintonville Inc. kind of helped partner with the city to make happen, have kind of languished. There's problems with maintaining it. There's light poles that they hit by cars and they just don't get replaced. The manners are kind of tattered a little bit. In December, we had some of the benches that were on High Street that were part of that project got hit by a car, and the city doesn't have any mechanism to replace that stuff. And Mike's comments were really, boiled down to why can't we have nice stuff? And how do we take care of this stuff? And one of the things that I think maybe Clintonville needs to consider, and I think maybe we're overdoing this, is creating special improvement districts. Special improvement districts are a device that was set up almost 20 years, just over 20 years ago by the Ohio legislature. And it's a program that allows communities to establish a way of creating the authority to raise money and spend it locally. So Columbus has special improvement districts. I think we now have 8 different special improvement districts. We have them at the Short North, we have the Discovery District, Capitol Crossroads, Morse Road, the University area, East Main Street, 5th, 4th, and Franklinton. And those are all successful SIDs that have helped to kind of do streetscape improvements, to do maintenance. And I think maybe it's time for Clintonville to move to sort of create SIDs. So I've been talking about this a little bit with Commissioner Bolton, and I think the way to move forward on this is for there to be a steering committee and a separate committee, because the SID ultimately is something that's not commission related. It's a separate thing. But the SID, if I can read through this, we did invite, we've talked with Mark Lundeen, who's with the Department of Development, about creating SIDs. What are the steps? What would the neighborhood need to do? And I'm going to read through a few of these things. But it's a self-help tool governed by Chapter 1710 of the Ohio Revised Code, allowing property owners within a self-defined district to organize and assess themselves the cost of providing area-wide services. Owners representing at least 60% of the street frontage along public streets and alleys, or at least 75% of the real property within a district, need to agree to create a SID and provide services. Then all owners within the district are required to contribute their proportionate share of the cost. The assessment funds are collected by the Franklin County Auditor's Office along with property taxes, forwarded to the city and turned over to the SID. So the important thing there is the people that form the SID, the property owners that form the SID, are the SID. They create their own board, they create their own rules, they create their own direction. They decide what's important to them. Is it trash removal? Is it marketing? Is it street enhancement with flowers? Is it keeping the right of way clean and neat? Whatever their priorities are, that's their service plan. So they create the service plan and they decide what resources they need to provide the level of service that they want for their frontage. And they don't have to talk to city council about it. It's their own board. And what we've discussed, at least on a very conceptual level, and we've worked with the auditor's office to gather some data about this, is establishing 3 different SIDs in Clintonville. The SIDs have to be contiguous commercial property. They can't be interrupted by residential property. So at least going forward, the initial suggestion is we would have a North High Street SID, which would be basically from the Worthington line, Graceland, Chase Road, thank you, down to just sort of just south of Morse Road. That kind of area is as a defined district. It would be South High Street, my neighborhood, which would be the Glen Echo Ravine on up to just the street where the Wendy's is. Torrance Road, and that would be sort of the South High Street, South Clintonville SID, and then the Indianola district. These are all the same areas that we defined several years ago when we requested that the city look towards developing architectural review areas for Clintonville. It's clear to me that the city has little to no appetite to add additional architectural review areas. I don't think that's going to happen. So as a measure towards creating some of the benefits that those areas have, I think SIDs could be a good first step towards that. 3 different SIDs would each have separate boards, so the folks on Indianola can decide what their priorities are, the folks in South Clintonville can decide what their priorities are, the folks in that North High Street section can decide what their priorities are. They could share a common service organization, so they might have one organization that they all share, the contracts for snow removal or trimming or aesthetic enhancements or branding or whatever that is. That's common to some of the SIDs too. 5th, 3rd, and the Short North share one services organization. Capitol Crossroads and the Discovery District share one common service organization. So that's not anything new. The way Clintonville does it maybe allows us to have the benefit of those pieces of our commercial district that kind of have their own association to figure out what their problems are, because the area up by Graceland and the north part of High Street has a different kind of flavor and character and probably different needs than my part of High Street, which is still part of that streetcar commercial district. And Indianola is a sort of unique animal with a sort of a one-sided street for most of the length that has its own kind of challenges. So those property owners can kind of decide for themselves what is desirable. So, you know, going forward, we've tried to assemble some data to do. We're looking to put together a steering committee to create its own independent committee. We'll make this presentation by Mark available on the website. We'll also ask Mark Lundeen to come back to the next month's meeting. He wasn't available for tonight's meeting, and present this more thoroughly from the city's perspective. The city's role is really to respond to the neighborhood initiative. So we create the organizational tool to incorporate the SID. We create the service plan. Those are both adopted by the city. They were reviewed and adopted by the city. We assemble all the data to support that in terms of the specific properties that are or are not part of the SID and the fundage. And then the referendum, which is really the key piece here, is you have to have 60% of the property owners opt in. And it's not just 60% of the respondents, it's 60% of the total property owners. So if you know, mail just goes unanswered or people don't get engaged, that's assumed to be a no response. So you start with 0 and you have to build 60% affirmative support. So the library is kind of giving us the signal that our time has come. I'm going to make a motion for adjournment. We'll return to the SID discussion next month. Brittany and I are organizing a meeting, a steering committee provisional meeting, March 14th, where Mark Lundeen will help us to understand SIDS a little bit more. We'll share a little bit of the data. If the commissioners available, we'll certainly make that. We'll put the information about that steering meeting on the website for committee. But if there's commissioners who have property owners, would be good people to contact as a way of engagement to find out what are your concerns, what are your problems with this, what are things that excite you about this, what are things that worry you about this. Getting those issues on the table before is part of explaining this proposition. Kind of one of our demands. So if you have contacts that you can help by sending to that meeting, just when you contact me, I'd love to talk to you. Take a motion to adjourn here so we can get out of the room.
Please help clean up, everybody. We're going to be on hyperspeed to close up.